Hello again, this is Jack Marshall here from the London Contemporary School of Piano, and this is video number 3 of how to play blues piano. We're going to be going over a few things again today, similar to how we've done it in the last few videos, so if you haven't seen those yet, it might be worth checking out our channel, where you can find those videos along with a bunch of others that you might be interested in as well. On this video though, we'll be looking at some different slow blues left and right hand patterns. As always though, before we begin, just to say if you do enjoy the work we do here at the school, then to be sure to head on over to our website, that's contemporaryschoolofpiano.com, and ask for our free resources pack. It's worth doing. So, let's begin. Okay, so like we've mentioned before in the other videos, there's of course many different ways in which you could do this. I'm going to show you one of the ways that I enjoy doing this, and I'm going to borrow the left hand from, well, I've certainly heard Fats Domino play this, although I've heard this on many different recordings. So the left hand pattern that we're going to be using on this one is relatively straightforward, and it sounds like this. I'm putting us in G today as well. The last few videos we've been working in C, so I thought I'd switch her up and put us in G today. So the pattern is this. Very straightforward. Nothing too tricky. So the only thing you really need to know here is how to play a triad, and then you have all you need to know to find the notes for this. So we're playing a G major triad, and we're basically going to be spelling that out. But the way we do it is that we play the octaves first, and then we spell out the third and fifth in between. And the rhythm of this is this sort of 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, and 3, 4, and 1. So it's a nice easy left hand. All you need to know is a triad, and that becomes particularly useful if you're ever transposing this in another key. So if you wanted to ever take this to say like E flat or something, all you need to know is a triad, and then you've done already half of the work for that. It's just applying the rhythm to it. So it's octaves first, 1, 2, and then we got 3 and 5 in the middle. And it's just a case of putting the rhythm to it. So this is literally just a triad that we've sort of, yeah, so it's glorified triad. We've hit the octave first and then the middle. Now depending where you are in terms of ability, you may find that this is pretty straightforward, so you may want to skip forward a little bit on this. But if this is quite new to you and you want to get a bit more comfortable with it, then I suggest just playing this left hand through a 12-bar blues form and just getting comfortable with that left hand, just like churning through it and moving along in each chord, moving to the 4th chord and the 5th chord. So in this key it would be C to D, and so let's try that now. I'll just play this through the left hand, and I'm going to put this an octave lower. You may find that if we do it too high, when you start putting stuff in the right hand, it starts to clash. So I'm going to put this an octave lower here, and we're going to work our way through a 12-bar blues just using this left hand. So here's how that sounds. Taking it quite slow, nothing too flashy, just moving our way through all the 12 bars. So we're going to move into C. Again, just spelling out the triad. Octaves first, C and C, then the 3rd and 5th. Back to G. Nice and easy. Moving now to the 5 on D. 4, and then back to the 1. You see, so that's literally all the left hand's going to be doing for this one. It's not too difficult, and it's particularly nice when you have to change it to somewhere else, because it's just a triad that we're spreading out. So for the right hand, of course, there's many different things you could do with this. A lot of the stuff that we've covered in the previous 2 videos can apply to this as well. We're just slowing all of those down. So, you know, be sure to check those out if you're not sure. But one of the ways I am going to show you how to do this is one of my favorite ways, just based on how easy it is and how much it doesn't break the bank as far as making you think, what do I do here if you're ever moving this into another key. So the main things that you want to think about here is 3 and 7 in your right hand. So in G, our 3rd note is B, and our 7th note is F. When I say 7, I mean the flat 7, because of course in the scale, F sharp would be the 7 technically, but we're playing the dominant 7. So that's 3 and 7. Now that doesn't sound very nice when on its own, but if we put it with the bass note, You see, then we're there, and it sounds a bit more appropriate. So I'm actually going to swap round that those notes. So I'm not going to put the 7th on top. I'm going to put it below, so it's down here. And now that we're there, all I have to do now is when I'm in the first chord, so the G, I'll be hitting this. And then when I want to move to the 4th chord, all I have to think about in my right hand is that I'm moving this entire shape down 1 semitone each. So I'm pivoting down. And what that does, it still gives you the 3rd and 7th of the next chord, but they've swapped around as far as where they are. So we have 3rd and 7th here on G, so that's 3, 7, 7th on the bottom. And by moving to C and pivoting down, now we have 3, 7. So they've swapped their order. The 7th is on the top this time and the 3rd's on the bottom. But just by the nature of the shape, you end up hitting the 3rd and 7th of that key. It's quite handy. Same thing if you want to move to the 5. So when we go to D in this key, I'm going to do exactly the same idea, but I'm going to move up a semitone. And when we do that, we get this. And you see, 3rd and 7th swapped over, but they're still there. So this is a really nice and easy way of just navigating your way through a blues. And of course, you can imagine doing this in another key quite quickly. You know, if you needed to find the 3rd and 7th of one key, once you've got that, then you just pivot a semitone up or down to get to the 4 or 5. So it's really handy for doing this when you're transposing. So I'll just quickly put that together and show you how that sounds. I wasn't following a form there, but I just wanted to show you how you could move. Incidentally, you may have noticed in my left hand that I occasionally slide off the minor 3rd into the 3rd, so it sounds a bit like... You see, it just gives it a little bit more of a bluesier sound, and it's not too difficult to do whilst you're putting your right hand to work with this. So, for the time being, all I'm really doing to start with, and I would recommend doing this if you're new to this, is just holding down those chords on the first beat of each bar and letting them ring until you have to change, which makes it a little bit easier just to get used to the movement. So you're on G for the first few bars, and you can just hold these down. But then when you actually need to move to C, you just pivot it down. So all the work is still happening in your left hand, but the right hand is just remembering these, like, slotting to these places, you know? So there is another right hand I'd like to have a look at as well, and it's only a little bit more complicated than that, but it's quite straightforward again, right? And the way that you do this, we're going into jazz territory a little bit here. So I'm going to show you some rootless voicings. It's really easy to do though, and all you need to do is know what a triad is again. So you can just think of this as triads in your right hand, but the difference being, instead of playing G major like this, I'm going to replace our thumbs note with the 7th. So I'm moving it down 2 semitones. And what that gives you is a rootless voicing of G. See, these are all the notes of G, except for G itself, because the G is in the left hand. So this is very much a jazz way of thinking about things, which is like this rootless voicing thing. And we're there, you see. So if I needed to move to C, then I would play a triad, but I would drop my thumb to the 7th. So that's 2 semitones down. Same thing with D, play a triad, but the thumb's dropped. And you see how that's like quite a nice easy way of doing it, and I much prefer playing 7ths like this than this. Right? It's not that they both have exactly the same notes. It's just this one feels a little warmer to me when you're doing it. So you can take those shapes and play through a 12 bars like that and just go through it. You see, all you have to really think in your right hand is, I'm playing a triad, but the thumb's 1 tone lower than it should be. And you should hit everything that you need to just by doing that. So occasionally I sort of do this movement up to these shapes. I don't just hold down the chord. I sometimes do this slightly interesting movement toward it. So it's like I have this chromatic. You see, so all I'm doing there is just hitting like these. And then hitting the chord. So that can be quite effective. You see, it's just the root and then moving up. relatively chromatically, and then hitting the chord with it. And we don't always just have to hit these chords out and hold them down for the full 4 beats of every bar. We can do something a bit more interesting. We can do like a 2 quaver sort of pattern at the start. Just something different. Because like we've said in the other 2 videos, that this is all about getting our left and right hands working together in sync. So sometimes not doing anything too complicated is a good way to get that happening quicker. We can do other rhythms though, of course. Like we don't just have to do that. We can do like triplets, which is very reminiscent of like Fats Domino, which is that sort of. That's just triplets going through the whole thing. And you notice I'm not just doing everything at the same velocity. I'm not doing this. Right? It's not like that. I'm trying to like emphasize and put a bit more weight on certain ones, so it's a bit more. Good way to think about that is that whenever the thumb hits a note in the left hand, that could be where you put a bit more weight in the right. So like if you pay attention to whenever my thumb does something in the left, listen to the velocity of the right hand. So it's like. You see what I mean? So it's just a way to kind of break things up, stops the monotony of the sound a little bit, and makes you sound interesting. So like we've said before with the other ones, you can of course interchange these, you can mix and match them. Any of the patterns we've done previously can be applied to this as if you transpose them into G, and you can just sort of mix them. So just with the 2 that we've looked at, although they're not completely different from each other, you can actually like use a variety of those 2. So I could start with the 3rd and 7th in my right hand, and then I could do the new chord. See, and the idea is that you're giving yourself more and more things that you could potentially do over a blues, and that's what this whole thing is. It's just getting you more ammunition for it. Now, quickly before we move on, there is a point that I want to bring up, which is something that I get asked by some of my students a lot, which is whenever they improvise with this, they disrupt the left hand. Again, we've mentioned this before, but I'm sure you're very familiar with when you try and do something interesting here. This one totally like falls off the rails. So it's good to always try and play with it first. So if the rhythm of the left hand is this sort of quaver push, sort of 1, 2 and 3, 4 and 1. So like you match that left hand's pattern to the notes of your right hand. So there's a few scales you can use for this, and so a blues scale would be good, or a major blues scale. Just quickly, if you don't know what those are, G blues scale would be so that's G, B flat, C, C sharp, D, F, and then we're back to G. So 1 flat 3 4 sharp 4 5 7, and then the 1. Or we can play the major blues scale, which is a little bit different. So if you know how to play a pentatonic scale, which is 1 2 3 5 and 6, that's 1 2 3 5 and 6. Include the flat 3 with it, not instead of, as well as. So it's, and that is all of the notes there. And I used to like to just practice these without anything in the left hand, just moving up and down them to get my fingers used to it. Right, because the more facility you have being able to navigate your way through these notes, the easier and the better your solos will sound. So, so just worth going up and down with some of those scales. And again, if you know a major scale, then you can find a pentatonic scale, because it's just the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 5th, and 6th of those notes, but then you include the flat 3 with it, and you could do it anyway. If you did that in C, there's pentatonic, include the flat 3, and then you have the scale. It also happens to be a minor scale of another key there, so if you were to play that all starting on A for that particular one, you'd get A blues scale. You see, so the pentatonic with a flat 3 is actually a minor blues scale in another key. It's worth remembering that, but we won't go into that too much now. So anyway, where were we? So when you're soloing with this, armed with those two potential scales you could use, and I would actually interchange between them. A lot of people do that. They pick one scale and then they switch to another. But I would stick to the rhythm of the left hand's pattern. So if your left hand is going 1, 2, 3, 4, then match that with the right hand. So you could literally just go up and down the scale with it. You see, so that's literally matching it note for note rhythmically there. And you know, we don't have to necessarily go up and down routinely like this. We can actually break up the notation eventually. See, so I'm not breaking the rhythm at all here. I'm playing perfectly with the left hand in its rhythm, but I'm swapping between like the notes that I'm using, sometimes playing the major pentatonic and then the blues scale, right? And then, you know, just by doing that can be quite handy. So we don't always have to just keep to the left hand's rhythm. Eventually we could start to like do, you know, say, you know, quaver practice over this. So that's like be like 1, 2, and 3. That's just continuous quavers, you know, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and that's a good way to, you know, practice giving your fingers a bit of a workout in like where to go next. Because if you do it continuously, the rule is that you can't stop. So you're forced to try and find the right notes to go along next. So it's a good way to put yourself under a little bit of pressure when you're practicing. You wouldn't maybe solo like that the whole way through, but it is one way of doing it. So, you know, you can work through it like that. And one of the ways I like to teach some of my own students how to do this is that I tell them to try and flank your lines with chords. So what I mean by that is that you could have a phrase that you're playing, and then when you're finishing that phrase, you can end on a chord shape. And what that does, it sort of like tells the listener that you're done with that particular phrase that you've played. So what I mean by that is that you sort of you flank your line. So you start your line off, and you see that was my phrase ended with a chord there. I'll just give you another example. So I do the line, and then I end with a chord. See, there's the chord. Another line, chord. Right, and it's good not to make it too obvious when your phrase ends. A lot of people, when I hear them solo, they'll like do a really obvious beginning and end. So they start it and finish it on exactly the same place. They'll do something like. So it's always in the same sort of way. So practice like playing, once you're a bit more independent of your hands here, this is assuming of course, practice like ending your phrases in parts of the bar that you wouldn't have initially stopped at the start. So you're almost like trying to keep it going a little bit, because that'll break up this sort of, people are very good at recognizing patterns very quickly. So if you stick to a motif too long, it can sound a little bit monotonous. So like so for example, if I'm gonna finish my phrase off, you see, now that phrase was finished halfway through a bar there. So it wasn't like starting a phrase and ending at the end of the bar, starting at the phrase, ending at the end of the bar again. I was pushing through in the middle of the bar to end my phrase. This is a little bit more advanced when we come to soloing. And of course you would need to be pretty free up from the left hand here. So this is perhaps a little bit more of an advanced tip. But yeah, so when you're trying to like solo, use the end destination as one of those chord shapes, and then decide when you bring that in. It can be a very effective sound. So whenever whenever my phrase is finished, I will bring in the chord afterwards to kind of state that that was my phrase done there. You know, it's a effective way of soloing, and I use it quite a lot. So there you have it, a few simple ways in which you can start playing some slow blueses. Bear in mind that you remember that these left and right hand patterns are interchangeable, so you can swap them out with something different and come up with a bit of a different sound. That's actually part of the whole fun of this style of music, right? It's that you can, they're interchangeable. You can swap out different patterns and come up with an effective sound. I would certainly recommend listening to some different blues players or blues tunes, just to get a little bit of inspiration on what other people do on this, and you know, it's an effective way to listen to people who know what they're doing and try and work out what their thought processes were on that. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. Thanks very much for joining me again, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Cheers.